This video is going to be about factoring. And we're starting in a different place than most people start with factoring. Normally you learn how to factor something out of a polynomial before you learn how to factor a polynomial. But what I found is that people tend to forget to factor things out because it's something that they learned a long time ago instead of the most recent thing that they learned. So we're actually going to talk about factoring stuff out of a polynomial later on. Even though we have a homework on it earlier, we're going to start talking about factoring a trinomial into two binomials first. Let's start going the other direction though. Let's start by, sometimes we call this simplifying, and sometimes we call it expanding, or sometimes we just call it multiplying. And some people actually call this foiling because you use the FOIL method. It's not one of the really accepted terms, but if you say that to somebody, they generally know what you're talking about. We want to simplify this. We want to put this in polynomial form. So let me rewrite this real quick. X minus 4 times x plus 5. I don't want the parentheses. I'm just going to do this by feel pretty much. I'm going to do this by distributing. So I'm going to take this x and multiply it by everything in this second binomial. I get x squared. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. And it's a positive 5x, so I'm adding those. And then I take this negative 4, I multiply it by x. And I take this negative 4 and I multiply it by 5. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. When I combine like terms, I get x squared plus x minus 20. Now, when I go this direction, this is where I see all those names. Simplifying, expanding, or multiplying. So let me write simplifying. However, when I go the other direction, if I go upward instead of downward, we call that factoring. So if we start here at x squared plus x minus 20 and end up with x minus 4 times x plus 5, then that would be factoring this trinomial into two binomials. There are a lot of questions about, you probably have a question about why you would want to do something like that. We'll talk about that during the next unit on when we actually solve some quadratics. This is going to be very useful. But really, it's just one method of doing it. It's just a glorified guess and check. So factoring is really just glorified guess and check. It's really, there's really, I wouldn't say nothing special about it, but it's just a way of writing it differently. So let's say that we're starting with x squared plus x minus 20, and we didn't do all this. Let's say we're just given this and we're told to factor this. How would we start with this? Well, let's look back. We have this 20. Where'd this 20 come from? It was this, this negative 4 and this 5 together. So basically I'm looking for two things that multiply to give me 20. So I'm going to set up a chart here. I'm going to set up a chart, and most of the time I'm not going to label them. This is the first time though, so I will. I'm going to look for a factor of negative 20. And then this will be my other factor. And then we're going to have another column for their sum. So if I take 20 and I take one of the factors, let me just list them all out. And normally this is not the most efficient way to do this, but I'm just going to list out all the factors. So I've got 1, 2 goes in there, 4 goes in there, 5 goes in there, 10 goes in there, 20 goes into 20 also. Don't forget about this 1 and this 20. People tend to forget about those. Very important to remember those. So these are the factors of 20. One of the factors of negative 20, I'll just put it in here. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with 1. My other factor would have to be 20. Now 1 times 20 is not negative 20, it's positive 20, so I have to put a negative sign here. However, if I have a negative sign, I don't know whether the negative sign should be here or here. I could have a negative 1 and a positive 20 also. So these are two different pairs of factors. 1 and negative 20 is not the same as negative 1 and 20. They both multiply to give you negative 20, but they're two totally different pairs. Another pair, 2 and negative 10. I could also have negative 2 and positive 10. Now normally when I'm doing this, I'm actually making the sum column because that's going to save me some time. I'm just going to list all these out. 4 and negative 5, and negative 4 and positive 5. Now I'm not listing these again. If I put negative 20 in the first column and a positive 1 in the second column, that's really not different than multiplying 1 and negative 20. So I'm not going to rearrange the order. I just want to list out all the possible pairs of pairs of factors that give me 20. Now I'm just going to make their sum. 1 and negative 20, that's negative 19. Careful of your signs, your integer rules. This will give me a positive 19. This is a negative 8. This is a positive 8. This is a negative 1. And this is a positive 1. Now the reason why I'm doing that, the reason why I'm finding the sum, is if you look over here, this negative 4 and this positive 5, they manifest themselves as this middle term. And this is really only useful when I have a quadratic equation or something that looks like a quadratic equation, quadratic polynomial. And when I have a trinomial. So this is a very special case, but it crops up all the time. So it's really not that rare. I have a quadratic and a trinomial. Here's 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. Now this middle term, this x term right here, that comes about by adding this positive 5 and this negative 4. That gives me a positive 1. So this negative 4 and this positive 5, if I add those together, that gives me a positive 1. So basically the sum of these guys gives me my coefficient. My coefficient right here is 1. So if I think of my coefficient here as being a 1, I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply to give me a negative 20 and add together to give me a positive 1. The only pair of numbers, and this will always be unique, the only pair of numbers that will combine to give me a negative 20 and a positive 1. These are the factors of negative 20. I want a positive 1. It's this one right here, negative 4 plus 5. So here's what I do. I'm factoring this guy, x squared plus x minus 20. Whenever I factor something like this, I'm always going to have an x here, an open set of parentheses, and then another set of parentheses. So I'm going to have a binomial here and a binomial here. And what goes in this set of parentheses? This negative 4 here. Negative 4. That went down there. And this positive 5 right here goes down here. And again, this is a positive 5. And then I check. X minus 4 times x plus 5. If I FOIL this out, or if I expand this out, or simplify it, or multiply it, I get x squared plus 5x minus 4x minus 20. And then I combine like terms. See, these guys are going to add up together to get a positive x, or positive 1x, minus 20. So that does in fact give me what I want. Now I have to be very careful here because my answer is not x squared plus x minus 20, because that's actually what I started out with. I'm trying to factor this. So the actual thing that I would circle is this guy right here. This is the factored form. This is just a check. Now, if this had occurred earlier on, and the reason that I would calculate my sum as I'm going, if I were looking for a negative 8 instead, then I would keep on going until I hit this negative 8, and then I would stop. There's no reason to keep on going. So I'm not going to create more work for myself by continuing to generate all these factors of negative 20. If I get something that has a lot of prime factors, for example, 32 has a lot of prime factors because that's 2 to the 5th power. There are a ton of different ways that I can make 32. I'm going to keep on going until I hit what I'm looking for, and then I'm going to stop. But I have to make sure that I check it because it's very easy to mess this up if you're not thinking about it in the right way. Let's look at another example. X squared, let's say minus 6x plus 8. Now, it's possible that you might just be able to see some of these things. If I know that I'm looking for two things that multiply to give me negative 20 and add up to give me a 1, I might know that 4 and 5 is my best bet. I know that one of them is going to be negative, and I know it should be the smaller number, so I know that I should have a negative 5 and a positive 5 and a negative 4. Okay, on this one, on the other hand, let's make the chart again. And I'm not going to label it, but these first two columns are going to be my factors of 8. Let me actually label these factors of 8. Now, if you get in a hurry, you might actually miss these. So factors of 8. 8 and 1, 4 and 2, and that's it. If I am keeping track of their sum, that gives me 9, and that gives me 6. Well, I'm not looking for a 6, I'm looking for a negative 6, so I haven't hit it yet. The tricky part is to know that 8 and 1 make 8 when I multiply them, but also negative 8 and negative 1 will make 8 as well. Oops. So that will give me a negative 9. And then a negative 4 and a negative 2, that will give me a negative 6. I'm looking for this negative 6 because that's my middle term right here. It's the thing that's attached to my x. So I know that the numbers that I'm looking for are negative 4 and negative 2. So again, let me write out what I was actually looking for in the first place. X squared minus 6x plus 8, and I'm factoring this. I'm going to get an open set of parentheses, x, and I'm going to leave a little bit of space, another open set of parentheses with an x, leave a little bit of space, and what do I fill in? I fill in the two numbers that will add up to give me that negative 6, negative 4 and negative 2. If all goes well, this is going to be my answer, so this is what I would circle. Let me expand this out. This is x squared. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8. That's where that positive 8 comes from. Perfect. Now I take this x squared and negative 2 minus 4. That's how I actually came up with this negative 6. That's going to give me negative 6x, and I have that plus 8 again. So this is exactly what I'm looking for. I have to remember that I am not circling the check, I am circling this factored form right here.